people, welcome back to Get Set Green, the podcast where we explore ideas, people, and solutions shaping our sustainable future. I'm your host Pooja Avi, and today I'm speaking with someone who has been at the forefront of connecting governance, policy, and climate action. Ritvika Bhattacharya, founder and CEO of Swaniti Initiative. Swaniti works with governments and communities to address critical challenges, from renewable energy transitions to sustainable livelihoods. We'll talk about her journey, her work, and the future she is building. So, Ritvika, welcome to Get Set Green.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here today.
Pleasure is all ours. So, Ritvika, you have worked at the intersection of policy and public service for years. So, can you take us back to the moment or experience that first connected you to climate and sustainability?
Absolutely. It's a very interesting story. So, Swaniti's crux and Swaniti's core belief of what we do, and what I personally saw a lot, was that if you look at where the Indian government stands today and its fundamental ethos, um, India as a country is actually fairly resource rich. There's a lot of resources. If you look at programs like Kusum or Muft Bijli Yojana, these are large budget programs. If you look at also the rationale behind these programs, there's a lot of willingness to want to look at energy transition. Swaniti's interface with climate was actually a very coincidental one, where we believe that while there is the resources and the willingness, why is it that the last mile delivery is limited in what it can do? Why is it that our most incredible programs on pen, paper, resource allocation is fantastic? But if you look at the beneficiary, the individual, the community, it's not perhaps translating to the greatest extent it can, and there's potential to do more. So I'd say almost 7 years ago, we were working in Jharkhand in the mines districts, and particularly the coal mine districts. And what we realized during our work there, we were working with the district magistrate's office to look at how this particularly a fund called the District Minerals Trust Fund, DMFT, was being spent and what the possibilities were. What we noticed was very similar pattern is that there is quite a bit of resources in DMFT. The district administration, particularly the DMs we were working with, had such strong willingness and commitment to create sustainable jobs, to go ahead and to create pathways for what the possibilities were, particularly for mining community to redeem their own communities and ecosystem in the way that they were. But what there were limitations were that if you go to a Hazaribagh in Jharkhand, how many people or how many technical planners or how many data experts would be based out of there year on year to help deploy those resources effectively, to be able to reach out to the community and have that interface of a survey and a feedback of what they wanted, how to plan that, how to map that, and go further. So, Swaniti's experience of starting in the climate space was actually rooted in Jharkhand when we were working with these DMFT communities and realized that if you just zero in on looking at sustainable economic livelihoods for the longer term, there is so much work and appetite for the government to take this further. And for us, our impact of working in those particular communities was just tremendous, where we saw that DMFT tagged with Niti Aayog funds could really create projects like cage fishing. Like cage fishing was a project that we worked on where we got feedback from communities that look, there is this DMFT resource. Why not create fisheries and sustainably look at alternative incomes to agriculture, which would be possible. And Swaniti essentially ended up taking that feedback, working with the DM's office to operationalize it and deploy government sources. And that impact was so tremendous that we looked at how do we transition over the next year or two completely and squarely to the climate phase, which is where we've been since.
This is actually, the ground reality of what happened, and also shows us in a way that the availability of resources and how it has to be connected to the key stakeholder person is very much important, because if there is a misconnection between these two, there can happen a situation that both are going unused without being potentially used even when we have the availability of the same. Now that you mentioned this, right, particularly working with this Jharkhand communities, you understood this. So, what do you think is the main gap? Why is that on the paper we have all the resources available, and why do you think it is actually not reaching the ones which is supposed to be reaching?
So I'll wear the governance hat here, in terms of where the gaps are. I think when it comes to how we've looked at institutions, we've really looked a lot and very carefully at infrastructure built in India. So we really focus on governments being able to, have the right buildings, have the right equipment, have the right, have some of the right people, through our kind of state administration and national administration. But I don't think we have yet really thought through at a state level the technical support which is needed. Not all programs have a sound technical director who is, let's say, a data science expert to be able to really analyze what trends of consumptions and patterns of consumptions have look like. So when it comes to kind of governance and where we are by way of support, when you go to a state level, there it's present, and certainly at a district level, that the kind of people you need to be able to take India to that next level of critical thinking and looking at what the gaps are and how are we staffed, that's still not there as much as we need. And let me just give you two quick examples. So right now we're working in Andhra Pradesh with a fantastic officer, who's leading discoms there on what are the kind of financial models which will allow for more renewables to come in. And this is a very progressive officer, and he's been very supportive of the work. But what we realize is that while this discom is so large, there is no financial modeling capability which is present for renewable energy to be able to look at, okay, what do I need, how much do I need to transition where in order to have a bottom line that is benefiting me as a discom. So you start to realize that there are gaps and there are not the provisions to fill those gaps with the requisite officer and talent.
And when you say this discom, is it related to like renewable energy point of view, whether it is a policy oriented project, let's say, or is it related to the government offices? I don't know. I did not
Right.
understand that part.
Right. So basically, DISCOMs, like several other entities, have a mandate right now to look at renewables and to look at transition for renewables, let's say for a household perspective or from a farmer perspective. So while they have the mandate, the DISCOM is going about doing its usual business, right? There's no additional capacity of someone who can come in and say, okay, help me map out what it means if I move all my farmers to renewables. Also, how do I move all my farmers to renewables? Am I doing
Yeah.
top? Am I doing solar grids? What am I doing? Right. So in this particular case in Andhra, we're actually providing that technical support of saying, look, Andhra Pradesh state government, you have these tremendous targets, you have the willingness. So can we now have someone work with the discoms to operationalize this? The argument I was making
Okay.
with the person is that there are these tremendous targets, but while we've set these targets, are there also provisions to, let's say, hire someone who's a financial modeler who can sit out of Isaac to be able to do this work, right?
Great.
Unfortunately, our contours don't allow for that right now. It's not that it hasn't happened, but there needs to be that agility to bring in people with those expertise.
Oh, that sounds, like quite a visionary project because given India's targets for renewable energy and inculcating the sustainable agricultural practices also. Now, let's say, Ritvika, if farmers or even any startup or an organization, if they are looking towards this, whether it is Discom as an entity or if there is any other entity which is also looking at various other projects, if they want to participate, why while giving the technical aspect, technical knowledge or service, or the ground bringing them the man resources or the technologies, how can this happen?
Right. So I think we are really at the precipice of what is a tremendously large energy transition. Even today, Prime Minister Modi ji kind of announced his vision on nuclear. and essentially moving towards nuclear. I think there are multiple areas in which both young entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs in general, farmers can kind of come in. One is to be able to actually set up those clusters of technology which are present, which respond to community needs. You see, till now, I would say not even till now, till a couple of years ago, we availability of renewable energy at this scale was not present. So you could take a standard template of what was working and take it across to multiple states. As we look at each state, each district, each village block kind of responding to this renewable and sustainable energy need, there has to be more of a community participation of what works for that respective community. And I think for that we need a very robust entrepreneurial ecosystem to not just come up with what the technology solutions are, but how do we A, implement it, and B, equally importantly, maintain that technology and availability. So, having an ecosystem of entrepreneurs who can respond to that, be able to set up these technologies and be able to maintain them is going to be critical to us establishing ourselves as a global south, or actually a global leader on energy and renewables. The second piece is, I think, with farmers and with smaller clusters of communities, there is a huge component of giving feedback of what is working and what is not. So let's take the example of Maharashtra. Maharashtra has had one of the most successful programs with farmers with agricultural solar feeders because the Maharashtra state government realized the need for continuous energy security for farmers, which was going to be possible through solar feeders. Now,
Correct.
if day and night is working or not for farmers is something that there needs to be the provision, the initiative to give feedback on what the possibilities are which are working and where there is limited. And I think where the kind of more community leader voices come in through farmers, through, I'd say grassroots leaders, is actually by providing that continuous feedback loop of where there is strength and where there are limitations.
That's, a comprehensive way of putting things together and, helping us understand, Ritvika. Thanks for that. And today, what we can see is like there is a big transition where uh, Indians and Indian families are also looking towards not just getting jobs. People are also most, impressed and also are showing more interest towards, building the entrepreneurial journeys, entrepreneurial ecosystem. I think it was never the time in India that where you can see many VCs, many angel investors funding, not just, like into the famous terms of whether it is in the internet of things or whether it is related to the let's say e-commerce, few other aspects of the businesses, but people are also now willing to invest in long term ecosystem of chains, which can be either biotechnology, life sciences, and now also sustainability and renewable energy. So, given this availability, Ritvika, let's say if a person wants to start, addressing this, whether it is in terms of policy or having a technology which can solve these problems. So, what is your advice for them if they want to start today?
I think, first of all, I am I'd say a product of India's liberalization. So I was born in the late 80s and I really got to see what the 90s have meant and what it's meant to come 30 years down the line by way of liberalization, and look at the 30 plus years, the impact of what it's done to markets. So I have great admiration for both the leadership right now on the governance side, as well as what it's meant for an increasingly liberalized economy. That being said, it is a tremendous time to be an entrepreneur, both from like a policy perspective as well as private sector and market systems perspective. What I mean by that is that you I think right now, again, my bias is towards the policy space. There is an increasingly growing appetite for the government to take risks which can yield returns um, on technologies which have soundness. So let's again go back to today's nuclear technology. There's not a lot of countries who've had that appetite of saying, let's actively look at a carbon neutral technology, which is not solar, wind, or geothermal, but which is nuclear. The only
Yeah.
one I can think of is like the French government, which has done that. But I think announcements like this are indicative that the government is keen to explore the possibilities which are there. So, if you're at the cutting edge of a scalable technology, I would strongly advise looking at pathways, perhaps initially from a state government and then to a central government, of what support is possible, what feedback is possible to work collaboratively with the government. That would be my first feedback. My second feedback would be like to the policy wonks and data nerds, is that there is increasingly more interest for the government to understand technical nuances of how to be able to implement this and what scale looks like.
Yeah.
The number of times that I've had both bureaucrat as well as elected officials come back and ask questions on what the possibilities are with cutting edge technologies. What would is, I mean, the more fundamental ones, not just like floating solar, but I remember for a while there was this whole conversation of like hot air balloons being sources of electrical of renewable energy, and I remember getting a lot of questions around that. What are the possibilities of seabed mining? What are the possibilities of more sustainable mining? So these are questions which honestly in the last, I'd say 5, 10, 15 years have really come up to go ahead and to kind of be asked more detailed and nuanced way from the government. So policy wonks, I would strongly advise reaching out to different administrators and engaging and working together to give more mindful feedback.
Okay, got it. So, can you share as an example of a partnership or project where working with government created a real, measurable change in the green sector for us?
Absolutely. I can give you several, but let me give you one that is one of my favorite ones more recently. So again, it speaks to the drive of where we're living in. So as you know that the central government has a net zero target, and these have been
Correct.
passed significantly to states. Now, what the one interesting thing is that with states, there is kind of what would be said in bureaucratic talk as like mission mode to want to accomplish those targets. So Swaniti has been actually working with 8 state governments on looking at how do you get to solarize public health centers. And with public health centers, these are obviously a network of health centers across different states, depending on the state. A state like Madhya Pradesh has maybe more than 2,700. A state like Uttar Pradesh has probably more than 3,000 health centers, which want to be which have the scope not just to solarize but to then in the process reduce the carbon footprint. Swaniti's problem statement was that, look, while there is interest and resources in solarizing, the reason that there is limitation in doing so is because there are oftentimes there's not again that bandwidth to create a data room to see what is the consumption pattern of these health centers and then how much do vendors or either resco vendors or capex vendors needing to respond or build in. And then the second was that the tenders, RFPs, whatever you want to call them, requests for proposals that go out are still dated, so they don't have the requisite structures or the financial payment structures which would bring in more vendors to bid for this. So Swaniti essentially physically placed a team in 8 states to be able to respond to this and create data rooms, which would have like immense amount of details on how much is the load capacity of PHCs, what do vendors need to respond to, and then work on agreements which would resonate with the private sector. And after we did both of those, we actually had in all states not just a request for solarizing public health centers, but the government was so forthcoming that they actually wanted to solarize all government buildings. So it
Oh,
kind of
okay.
had that ripple effect where we then have started working on solarizing government buildings to be able to move towards rooftop solar technology. Um,
Mm-hmm.
this is indicative both of the interest level, but then also of the scale of impact that you can have when working with government. And so
Correct.
more recently, this has been kind of telling to us about how India is really leading the pathway for solarizing and moving to renewables at scale.
And I think it's an interesting space to be for us, to look forward ahead with the visions which we have set and how dynamically things are changing and how quickly people are pacing themselves into this transition mode. And I'm also happy to understand that the level of commitment and involvement from various state governments to actually come ahead and commit themselves to transition into this is astounding. And also I'm like appreciating the fact that they are actually working towards this. So, Ritvika, when we have this example, right, you gave an example of solar energy angle to it. So, if we go back and focus on this mining part, right, from the regions of Bihar and Jharkhand, given the nature of its rich fertility of available materials, it has always, let's say, in a critical zone because of the so much availability is there. Then it also gives us an opportunity to abuse the abundance availability of materials. So in such scenarios, how policy building can help the people and as well as the residents, normal social communities which are residing in these critical hotspot zone areas.
So that's a very valid question. And, like I was mentioning, we are truly at the precipice of a not just an energy transition, but a point of looking at how do we reinvent the systems that work for holistic inclusive growth. So the what I mean by that is we're now increasingly moving from coal mining to critical minerals mining, for example, because there is a need for things like lithium, nickel, copper,
Yeah.
rare earth elements, the a very long list of what is critical minerals for renewable technology. While that is happening, it's not just about exploration of new sites and setting up increased number of processing centers, but looking at how a Jharkhand, which is moving from coal to, let's say, rare earth elements or lithium, is going to also look at inclusive growth, which is present locally and sustainably. And I think there is an opportunity and a window for us to rethink about how we can more equitably distribute benefits. And this is not just for a Jharkhand, but for India at large. So if you look at the National Critical Minerals Mission, one of the things that the central government has done increasingly is to look at how do you build your own national capabilities. So whether that's talent hubs which are present, whether that's processing which is present, whether that's downstream technology and manufacturing ecosystem. I think what we need to do is rather than at a state level, rather than just look at, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh are mining spots, look at, well, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh are hubs for developing, the critical minerals to a point where it's actually processed as well, and processed and created an ancillary industry of what else can be built around. So let's take the example of Texas, for example. In this situation, Texas has been very efficient in bringing in lithium battery manufacturing companies. And one of their big
Okay.
pitches in bringing in, and I'm actually sitting in Texas, so I can say this. One of the reasons they've been able to bring this in because a pitch that they have is look, you not only have critical mineral availability here, but we also have processing centers at work. So your supply chain for battery manufacturing is much more kind of attractive in the state because they don't have to then invest as much in transport. Being able to draw on those similar strengths, given we have that ecosystem, creates a Jharkhand that thinks beyond mining, creates a Chhattisgarh that thinks beyond mining, and then says, okay, we have created not just the processing centers, but then the battery manufacturing centers. What is possible to bring in downstream in the country, which will really create impact?
This is actually a better way of looking at things. But I come from, scientific background where I see calculating, let's say, what is the environmental impacts of this, or what is the carbon footprint of all the activities going on, or even, let's say, focusing on the factor of how the labor community is actually being involved in this whole process, whether it is the wages or whether it is the accessibility to the health and the sanitation aspects of it and access to understand how protected they are while performing these duties, and if they are equipped with such, let's say, skills for carrying ahead this mining or even the processing activities as such. So, Ritvika, if we have to understand this from another angle, let's say social angle to it, then what is your opinion on that to the existing state of the people of Jharkhand? Can you say from your background, where you also have worked with World Bank and you also have worked with Swaniti for so long, almost like 10 to 12 years in this. So can you give us your perspective on this, that how things are actually are today?
Right. So actually, let me kind of bring an out of country context for you because I don't think it's that different. So we recently, part of our work is also in Indonesia. We recently did this survey in two districts in Indonesia to consider to actually I think it'd be called regencies actually not districts, but one is East Kalimantan and then the other one is
Oh,
uh,
Kalimantan, yes.
right, and
Yeah.
Sulawesi. So Kalimantan, as you would know, has a coal phase out, which is going on, and then Sulawesi has a nickel mine where there's
Mhm.
actually a lot of mining happening. And the survey question, which was asked in both, was, how do you feel about having mining at the state where it does? And as a community, we wanted to understand what the community aspirations were, given that mines are in both places.
Places.
One of the interesting facet which came in was that both regencies admitted to the fact that bringing in mining has
Mhm.
meant that the community has seen an unexpected explosion with which there has also been coming in of different issues around law and order. But what was fascinating was that, and this kind of took me by surprise, was that both communities, however, did prefer, especially Sulawesi, that even if there is mining which is happening at a certain law and order cost, it still weighs out benefits of them outweighs the loss, primarily because jobs and economic development is that important. And
Oh,
so,
surprising.
right, which is
Yes.
again, if you look at a lot of social indicators or a lot of social conversations, you'll often hear
Mhm.
the other side of the losses
The
outweighing.
story.
Correct. And this was like a very pen and paper kind of feedback process. And so, one of the major things that we learned in the process and kind of probed in through, again, individual discussions was that a lot of communities were not earning half as much as they were. And we often
Mm.
underplay the importance of income. Now, that is not to say income will overpower things so much that we don't need to think about law and order, we don't need to think about social cohesion. But I do think from a community aspirations perspective, we need to figure out locally rooted solutions of how this does work where it does, right? So, again, Global North, there are several communities in the US that have holistically benefited from mining, including on issues of law and order. What did they do? How did that work for them? These are things which we need to fundamentally understand. In fact, even in South India, if you look at it, Karnataka, where there's a number of mines, it's actually led to holistic growth of the communities. And so the
Yeah.
question then becomes, what is not working in Jharkhand? What is not working in other parts where there is mining, which is happening, which where we can potentially learn on how to strengthen that ecosystem with a kind of pointed feedback.
Actually, this took me by surprise. I have to agree on this because every time when you hear the public outcry, when the mining project has been announced or declared, you see a different kind of the story. But actually, for the people who are benefiting or not even benefiting, for the people, what it means changes from their own perspective of seeing, looking at things with different angles. So, this is one surprising factor, I must agree. So, Ritvika, so when we talk about this climate policy, it can sound distant from everyday lives, right? How do you ensure that these solutions actually work for people at the local level?
Right. So I think honestly, climate started out as a conversation amongst a specific group of individuals who had more resources. But it
Mhm.
honestly, its impact and its kind of I say, yeah, impact is just felt on everyday people and more so on those who are most vulnerable. I mean, this has been repeated over and over again. And I feel that the strongest impact of what we're seeing with climate is actually on economy and livelihood. I mean, if you look at how India is kind of focusing towards climate, it is a story about energy security and not necessarily are we meeting the 2-degree target? Have we passed it? What has that meant? Um, I feel that the reason this is rooted in communities is because if you look at farmers and if you look at agricultural yields and if you look at crop soil patterns, like these are shifting very quickly. This is not, again, about climate change, extreme weather disasters. In fact, if you look at weather disasters as well, the frequency has increased and is likely to continue
Yeah.
increasing. The reason communities work and our work becomes that much smoother when we do this is because we work on issues that they're grappling rather than on climate change lens. So we will never come in saying we are a climate change agency. We will come in saying,
Oh, correct, exactly. Because the whole narrative changes, right? When you say that you're working towards what is bothering them and the grappling issues, rather someone coming into the picture and saying that we are actually climate agency. That's
right.
a whole different story. Yeah.
Right. So even with the work with government hospitals, which I mentioned to you, it's not about, is this going to reduce the carbon footprint? It's about, can we help provide continuous energy supply to you? Will your cold storage units now work better? So I think we have to speak the language of what matters to the community instead of what we think matters to them.
Exactly. Correct. I think that's the whole differentiation factor, I feel personally, because every time when you have a relatable factor, the more people will be willing and they will understand it better. Rather, I bring some scientific jargon and nuances which they totally feel off related to.
Right.
Exactly. So, Ritvika, of your, given that your experience working with this policy, governments, and communities also, uh, what has been the toughest challenge in pushing towards, let's say, for sustainable policy change, or even coming to the matter of societal or social angle policy change?
So I think it's the part of being an entrepreneur is that you have to reconcile with yourself more than anything else externally in how
Yeah.
much you're doing. And I think one of the issues that I deal with kind of in my mind every day is, are we running fast enough? Are we growing fast enough? Are we responding to what I mentioned is a window in time of the kind of impact which we can have. And I never feel like we're running fast enough, especially with India. I think there is so much appetite, interest, desire to want to move towards honestly something that no country of this size and scale has been able to achieve. And so I feel like we, again, going back to your question actually on what entrepreneurs can do, I do think that we need to jointly collaborate to respond to what I think is a tremendous push from different governments on
Mhm.
transitioning.
Maybe to summarize this, what is actually important in today is that how are we pacing towards this change and how quickly are we doing it? Correct.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Ritvika, with all the experience, right, you also have been part of World Bank for a few years. You have been associated working there, and you were also part of FICCI in India. And being having seen, wearing different shoes and seeing different angles from your experience all these years, what is that you want to share with us? Whether in terms of let's say key guidance, if I may say, like 3 points which will help us guide in our life. It may not be directly related to the policy angle or such, from your personal journey of your life.
So let me. I have a 4-year-old daughter, so I will share with you
Oh.
what I will share with her. Obviously, I think she has a lot more intelligence and capability than I do. So it's a little hard to give her sound advice. But I think the first thing I would say is that the pace of change right now globally is phenomenal. If you look at every sector, if you look at AI, if you look at climate, if you look at geopolitical change around critical minerals, like we are living through an age of just transformative change and exponential change, which we're facing with every day. This is like a glass half full, half empty situation where how you choose to respond to it and how much of a risk taking appetite you have is really going to define, I feel like, individuals and leaders of the next generation. And so I would strongly encourage to take time and to think and to kind of be more risk taking at this point in time, because
So the first point is risk appetite
have a bigger
or
risk appetite.
calculated risk. Yes, yeah.
I don't think any entrepreneur can calculate the risk. A risk is a risk. Risk is what you do. So I think that is one thing which I would say. The second thing that I would say is that keep at pace with all the changes to the best of your ability. Again, there is a lot which is happening, but keep at pace with what the different technologies are having, but also what the implications of those technologies are. So let's take the example of AI. It's not just about how many tools there are, what has it meant, but from both a policy angle as well as from like a material angle. There are data centers which are popping up across the world. What does
Yeah.
this mean for us every day? What does this mean by way of energy consumption, water consumption?
Water consumption, yes.
Water is I wouldn't even say next crisis. Water is the now crisis.
Now
So,
crisis.
so
Yeah,
what,
agree.
yeah, and you're in Bangalore, so you definitely feel it. And
I agree more than anyone.
right, and in Delhi, we've been feeling it for years. So I know that this is the now crisis. So think holistically, but keep yourself apprised of what is happening by way of the transformational shifts which are happening and its implications. Again, it will define
So
your thinking. Yeah,
adaptable.
yeah. I'd say
Okay.
more abreast and more
Hmm.
updated to what is happening.
Okay, updated
Yeah.
towards the like recent trends. Okay. You have one more to go, Ritvika.
Oh, I would say the last thing is be kind and be gentle to where you are and how you stand, right? Because
Mm. Wise one.
I think the world is shifting so quickly, it's very easy for us to be hard on ourselves. And why are we not keeping up with what is happening? Being overwhelmed is an emotion which is going to be more and more prevalent because of all the things that are happening. And that is just globally. Forget your personal life and everything that goes on with it. So I think being kind and being gentle and being present is something that is really important at this point.
Mm. Okay. Be kind, be gentle. So that's
Yeah.
our 3 points. So 3 points from Ritika to take away for us would be for today is like first is the risk appetite, and the second one is like how be updated with the changes and trends, and the third one is like be kind and be gentle with all the changes happening around us. So we are at the end of this session. We will have a small, let's say, the rapid fire round. This is just for fun. We will have like 4 questions. Ritika, you can go ahead and answer this. I will start the first question now. Uh, Green habit you never skip. Mention one green habit which you never skip.
Turn off the lights.
Okay, great. A book, movie, or podcast that inspired your environmental thinking.
Habits book by Charles Duhigg.
Ah, okay. Your dream climate project if resources were unlimited.
Clean jobs.
Oh, okay. And one word that describes the future you are working towards.
Sustainable.
Okay, then you are already being, thanks. By the way, thank you so much for being sportive and playing this rapid fire round with us. And thank you for joining us and sharing your insights and stories. And also, all the best for all your future works and present work going on with Swaniti. And we would be really happy to know if there is any way we can contribute or volunteer, because I think the one who is listening to will also be willing to be part of your mission. So if you can help us, navigate this, that if we can be part of something like this, would be great, Ritika.
Absolutely, it'd be my pleasure, and we need all hands on deck. So, absolutely, would be happy to do that. And thank you for having me today.
That's it for today's episode of Get Set Green. I'm your host, Pooja Arve. Thank you for tuning in to the conversations that matter. If this story inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, subscribe, and join our community of change makers. Together, let's keep purpose meeting planet, one week and one story at a time. Until next time, stay curious, stay foolish, and let's get set to get green.